China, the world's oldest civilization, was born here. Thousands of years later, it is one of the world's chess powerhouses. For most of the past 30 years, China has held the most prestigious title in women's chess. The legacy of the Women's World Championship is rich. Menchik, Gaprindashvili and Chibananitsa, Kosteniuk, Xijun and Ho Yifan. Now, three-time world champion Ju Wenjun is defending her title once more. After vanquishing the likes of Katerina Lagno and Aleksandra Goryachkina, another rival awaits. Challenger Lei Tingjie had to defeat three grandmasters in matches In the first two rounds of the candidates, she took on sisters Mariya and Anna Muzychuk and won. Then in the final, she beat former world champion Tan Zhongyi.
And that's it!
Resignation! Lei Tingjie, the winner of the 2023 candidates finals.
Will Ju Wenjun defend, or will we have a first-time champion, Lei Tingjie? Half the match is in Ju's hometown of Shanghai. Half the match in Chongqing, where Lei hails from. Who will win and claim their share of the €500,000 prize fund? Welcome to the official broadcast of the 2023 FIDE Women's Chess Championship. Hello everyone, and we are back in Chongqing, and this is it. We have now reached the final two classical games in the Women's World Championship match, and it is down to the wire. With 5 points each, nothing can separate challenger Lei Tingjie from reigning Women's World Champion Ju Wenjun. But everything can change in these two classical games as it comes down to who has the stronger nerves and the greater stamina. Well, we will find out today. I'm your host, International Master Ivanka Hauska, and it is a great pleasure to be commentating all the action alongside one of the most inspiring advocates of women chess. She's been two-time US champion. She's an author of some of the best-selling chess books, Chess Bitch, Play Like a Girl, and of course my personal favorite, Chess Queens. She also set up a YouTube channel. Go follow it. It's called How to Beat Your Mum in Chess. It is none other than women grandmaster Jennifer Shahade. Jennifer, I know it's super early in the morning, but I'm going to say it anyway. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. I am so excited to call games 11 and 12 of the Women's World Championship with you, Jovi. This is really a dream come true. I've got my coffee. Nobody else is awake here in Philadelphia, except other chess fans, perhaps. And I'm just really enjoying life.
It's good. No, you gotta enjoy the chess because boy, it's been such a tense and exciting, thrilling match. I mean, I just can't stop raving about it. I mean, so close as well. And games 1 to 6 were played in Shanghai, and both Lei Tingjie and Ju Wenjun and the press conference, they did promise us fighting chess, and that is certainly what they have delivered. Because on paper, if you were to look at the openings, you would say, well, Berlin's is going to be a draw, and it was a draw. But these two, they really took it to the brink and they played every game out. And I have to say, Shanghai, it was more about Lei Tingjie, and she finally crashed through in game 5. And games 7 to 12, well, they were played in Chongqing, which is ironically Lei Tingjie's hometown. But there, it was all about reigning Women's World Champion Ju Wenjun as she changed tack, she changed her openings around, and it was Ju Wenjun that has scored the decisive victory in game 8. And we're here, game 11, game 12 yet to be played. What do we think?
Yeah, well, I was watching your broadcast with Judith Polgar when you saw the Caro Khan on the board, and you just like leaped out of your chair. You were so excited, Jovi. I mean, you have written a book on this opening. So what's it going to be today? I think it's going to be the Scandinavian, and then you're going to have to jump out of your chair again.
I will really jump out of my chair. I think I will do a loop around the room. If Ju Wenjun plays the Scandinavian, that would be very unexpected. I think your brother would also join me. Is he a big anti-Scandi fan?
Anti-Scandi, yeah. This is an anti-Scandinavian defense family, that's for sure. But yeah, let's. How about we compromise and like the C pawn is moved, right? So one of us is going to be happy. It's either going to be the Caro Khan or the Sicilian. But to recap, it's been these 5 white games of Lei Tingjie. This is going to be her 6th white. We've seen 2 Berlins, a Joko Piano. That's the one that she won. Fantastic game. And then we also had the Sicilian and the Caro Khan. So what do you think it's going to be, Jovi? You've seen the whole match. What opening do you predict?
I honestly don't know, just because Ju Wenjun has been changing up so much. It's Lei Tingjie, she's come well prepared, she's determined, she seems to know her openings inside out. So when you're facing an opponent like that, one of the best kind of strategies is simply just to keep changing. And this half, we've seen, Caro Khan, we've seen the Sicilian. I suspect we might see a Sicilian once more, but there we do see Ju Wenjun leaning back in her chair. But either way, whether she plays the E4, E5, whether she plays the Caro Khan or Sicilian, or even maybe the French defense, I am here for it.
Oh, yeah. And I'm here for that bright orange shirt. I mean, that's a real statement. Absolutely stunning color here. Lei Tingjie playing the white pieces. We're going to see E4. I think that's pretty clear. And the big question is, what opening will we have from Ju Wenjun? I mean, I did notice that in the game that she played at Caro Khan, she got a sizzling position, Jovi. I mean, that was a potential win for Ju Wenjun as well, right? There was a lot of possibilities for her there.
Definitely. And Ju Wenjun seems to have found the style where she is most comfortable in challenging Lei Tingjie. And it seems to be all about playing quite provocative chess and just asking Lei Tingjie just to make those committal moves forward. And Lei Tingjie, as you mentioned, always looking confident, looking up, smiling, giving us expressions. We do see the move E2, E4 played on the board. And what am I seeing? The move that was taken back for Ju Wenjun, because this is an interesting match, because the dignitaries always play both a first move for white and the first move for black.
But that's like so that's not the real moves on the board yet. So she could play a different move than E5?
Yeah, she could play a different move. But we did see E4, E5 from the dignitaries. So, well, we will see whether Ju Wenjun is intending that. Of course, E4, E5, there's plenty of ways to move around in that opening. It it might not be a Lopez, it might not be a Berlin, it might be something like a Petrov. And there we see Ju Wenjun, the big question. And of course, this is the last time that Lei Tingjie will have the white pieces in a classical game. Tomorrow is the final classical game, and there it is Ju Wenjun's turn. And that's an interesting scenario as well, because in the final game of the classical match, do you just want to go into an even match with your opponent having the white pieces and being able to control the pace of the game?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Absolutely. I think Lei Tingjie will obviously try to play this game hard. Such strong players, you can't bet against a playoff here. I mean, I got to imagine it's like a 2-to-1 chance that we are going to see that playoff. I mean, 2-to-1 in favor. Just because they both play so well, and there's even the possibility that if Lei Tingjie were to win this game, Ju Wenjun would hit back and force a playoff anyway. So I think that there's a very high chance that we're going to be here for a few mornings in a row, Jovi, which is music to my ears. But hey, a combative game is going to take place today. There haven't been quick draws here in this match at all, Jovi. And I mean, does that surprise you that there haven't been any kind of like repetitions in the opening just to kind of get an extra day of rest or something like that?
To be honest, yes, it does surprise me that they've played on and really drawn out the game as long as it can possibly go, because there have been some games where it just felt like the players should just make eye contact and say, let's just call it a day here. But no, they've kept the game on and almost played to the very end with just kings on the board. And there we're going to see a handshake. And we are about to set off. Let's go. Oh, I can't wait for the surprises to start rolling. And
yes.
Lei Tingjie pausing. Maybe the surprise is actually going to come from Lei Tingjie.
No.
Okay.
No. I think it's going to be double king pawn. That's my prediction. Let's see. There it is. Yes, it is double king pawn. And let's see if Lei Tingjie now goes for the Ruy Lopez or the Joko piano, which was the one game that she won was in a Joko piano. What do you think, Jovi? We're going to find out in just a few seconds.
Yeah, we certainly are.
C4 or B5?
Yeah, exactly. Where to put that light square bishop. And as you mentioned, it was in game 5 where she won with the Italian. And yep, there it comes again on the board.
Hey, that was her one win, like, fine, try it again, right? Maybe you'll win the exact same game.
And we are seeing knight f6 is d3 played.
Now let's see where Ju Wenjun is going to deviate, because of course I think from a psychological point of view, playing an opening which was from the one game that you win has the advantage of making your opponent maybe feel some unpleasant memories. And already we see a deviation, because in that game 5 that Lei Tingjie won, bishop c5 was played. Here Ju Wenjun is playing bishop.
Definitely more solid. And as you said, it's all about, keeping your opponent on the toes. And there you see Ju Wenjun, she has deviated bishop e7. And now is the time for Lei Tingjie to consider what she has prepared. It's quite funny with Lei Tingjie. Normally when she's surprised somewhat, she pauses and then she reels off a whole long line of theory. And I have to say, a lot of the theory that she's employing is quite topical as well. So she's really keeping abreast of the trends.
Yeah. And here she is. I reckon she's going to castle or...
yeah.
C3 is a move as well. But I mean, it's like very likely to transpose, because of course we're castling kingside here is why.
So many moves. I mean, I find that this this opening itself is just one of the most complex openings around. I've always struggled to handle it, and I say this quite openly, and it's due with the fact that the play is very cagey. I mean, White has a whole load of plans at their disposal. You mentioned one, just getting the king to safety. We also have ideas of c3 and rerouting the bishop back to c2 and trying to get d4 in at the right time. There's other ideas of going c3 and going b4 and just expanding on the queen side. This is also very popular. You can also put the knight on c3 if you fancy a solid game, although you have to make sure that this bishop on c4 stays alive.
Yeah. And a big question here is, can black get in d5 in a profitable way? Because I think that's what often determines whether black gets equality, or in some cases, they can get even more, right? So it's interesting to me that white in these types of Joko pianos usually plays for that more luxurious setup of going c3 and then going for d4 or b4, which is really beautiful structurally. But if the position opens up, sometimes it's black that has more development.
Exactly, and has more space as well. And there was some advice given to me by a grandmaster, and he said to me, yeah, I understand these positions are super complicated, but he said, basically, at the end of the day, 10 moves down the line, it's going to come down to who has the better light squared bishop. And he said, even if the bishop finds itself on c2, okay, and a knight c3 played by Lei Tingjie. And this is the third most popular move. And the critical thing for white here is that white must remember to keep this bishop on c4 alive. So for instance, when d6 comes, positional threat. This is white's great piece, and that's why you see a4 played.
Right, that makes sense. So what Jovi is saying is that if no d6, you can't play knight a5 because knight takes e5, right? So d6 really has a little bit of a positional threat, because I love that quote from your grandmaster friend, and I'm definitely going to steal it. But if you don't have a bishop on c4, then you can't. If your bishop on c4 goes, then you can't have a better light squared bishop, right?
Exactly. And even when it's so funny, because even when it finds itself on c2, you're still preparing c3, d4, and you're still 10 moves down the line. It's all going to be about the power of that bishop. And we actually saw it. This was one of the reasons why Lei Tingjie beats Ju Wenjun. And just to kind of rewind a little bit and just to kind of emphasize the points about knight c3, d6. Yeah, so you could not play knight a5 immediately, as Jennifer highlighted, because knight takes pawn or just simply win white material. So that's why d6 was played, just to overprotect e5. And after a4, the bishop has a little hidey hole on a2, and it's safe. And play is continuing with castles.
Castles, okay. And you mentioned that light squared bishop, and now let's talk about the light square bishop on c8. I mean, g4 can be a very attractive square for that bishop, which is particularly effective with the white knight on c3, right? Because you don't have the knight on d2 to protect your colleague on f3. So I wonder here if black can play bishop g4 right away, and what Lei Tingjie has in mind against that move. Is there going to be an h3 and g4 idea?
H3 is actually the main move.
Okay.
So I'm just checking the database, and because this is not my speciality, and I can see that white has 3 major moves. So number 1 choice is right up your street, Jan, and it's simply just to go h3 and stop that bishop coming to g4. And this is often a trick that we see employed in lower levels, so especially in junior chess. So say for instance you were to castle, you see this so often, I'm sure and then the bishop comes out to g4, and then say black copies, then this is awkward as anything. You don't want to ruin your kingside pawn structure. So just one to bear in mind. And if you don't want to engage in any of these shenanigans, then simply the main move is just to play h3.
Yeah, just play h3.
And Exactly. Just stop the idea once and for all. And Black's most popular response is actually to dive in and play bishop e6 and challenge the light square bishop.
Now, one important thing to point out here is that the reason White plays h3 now so often as opposed to a move prior is that White really wants to castle now. It's like time to castle. And if, as you mentioned, if castles bishop g4, h3, bishop h5, you don't really want to play g4 as much because your king is on that side of the board, right? So whereas if you're not castled, this line playing for like g4 would be pretty attractive, right? Because you haven't committed your king to the king side castling yet. So keep that in mind. These are the little nuances that go behind the openings that if you're just looking at the database, you might not quite understand. Like why h3 now and not the move before, right?
Exactly. No, that's a really good point. Yeah, h3, keep the king flexible. Another move that has been played before, so we might see this from Lei Tingjie, and it is again a trendy idea, and she is well on top of the trends. And so after a4 castles, it is possible to kind of see space, kind of play like the AlphaZero style of chess, which is like play on the wings with a5, and your idea comes into play, that bishop g4, then you can meet that with h3. And after here, you can always lock the position down with g4, and there's just no breakthrough for Black. And well, that would certainly be a battle. I wonder what Lei Tingjie has up her sleeve.
Yeah, well, let's see. We're going to find out quite soon after castles. She's thinking. So h3 is that we expected. You also mentioned the move a5. Castles, we're wondering if bishop g4 with the positional threat of knight d4 is a bit too nagging. So what's your prediction, Jovi? What do you think? I think we're going to see h3.
I think we'll see h3. I just also want to say that castles is possible, but you do have to take measures against a knight plopping into d4 after the bishop comes into g4. As long as you take care of that idea, then castles is possible. So just to kind of say Lei Tingjie, just castles the king. It's the second most popular move. Then after bishop comes to g4, knight d4 is a really big threat. So that's why White tends to play bishop h3 first. Let me get my move order right. So we'll be able to go g4. So dynamic stuff. And I don't know how much of the match you've been following, but one thing that's been really funny for all of us to see is that Lei Tingjie, she barely uses any time in the opening, and often we've gotten to move 10, 11, and she's got more time than she started with. So it's quite funny to see that the reverse is true. It's now Ju Wenjun who has more time than she started with. And this is a good sign, because I think knight c3 was certainly a surprise to Ju Wenjun, but she's just, okay, fine. She has it all under control.
Yeah, it's been another revelation, and I have been following. I mean, just fantastic commentaries you've been doing here, Jovi, with Danya, with Judith Polgar, and of course with the chess queen herself, Aleksandra Goryachkina. Another revelation is just Lei Tingjie's expressions. I know people are falling in love with her expressive face and how she conveys her feelings about the position. So not a poker face, right, Jovi, from Lei Tingjie?
But you mustn't underestimate Lei Tingjie, because one of my favorite moments was during the press conference. They asked the players, like, how truthful are you being here? And Ju Wenjun looked taken aback, and then she thought about it, and then she said, okay, 99.9% truthful. And Lei Tingjie kind of looks and gives one of her famous expressions and then goes, 50%. 50%.
I gotta tell you, that's really hard. there's a really it's hard to lie as much as you tell the truth. I know this from playing games like, whether it's Mafia, whether it's poker, it's usually way easier to tell the truth, right? Like, it's so difficult to lie. But perhaps not in chess press conferences. Apparently, that is the one exception.
Yeah, that is true. Actually, I think you can. It's easier to lie if you just litter the lie with some truths, and then you can build your story. But to kind of just tell lies, that's quite difficult. And I brushed up for this. I brushed up on my body language 101, and apparently when you look to the right, you're just imagining things. When you look to your left, look to the left, you're just remembering things. If you look right and down, that means you're low on self-confidence, and right and up, you're telling an outright lie. And But also, one of the things I forgot to mention in my intro is that, Jen, you are you are one of the best poker players around. So I guess you are looking at these small little body language tells.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that it is fascinating because we always talk about having a poker face, but having a chess face, what exactly does that mean? I mean, I think it means really kind of giving yourself that opportunity to focus, right? And also intimidating your opponent. So even though Garry Kasparov had one of the worst poker faces around, everyone would agree that he had the best chess face.
Yeah, he was certainly had this aura at the board of confidence, of that he really wanted to win. And I actually got that impression when I bumped into Anatoly Karpov as well one time in the Bundesliga. When he was looking at me, because I got out of the wrong floor, that he was just assessing me and just going, what an idiot. You got out on the mezzanine and the ground floor is, and I can imagine just sitting at the board against these players was quite an intimidating prospect. I think Judith was saying the same, that you felt that they were always playing for the win. And yes, as I saw that in chat, there's absolutely no way that Lei Tingjie didn't come to this position not knowing. She's just simply choosing what line to play, and she picks bishop g5. And let's have a look at that one. It's been played a few times before. Not the most standard idea, especially with the bishop on e7, but it is possible.
Yeah, so that is a bit surprising. That wasn't one of the top few moves that we expected. Do keep in mind that perhaps bishop e7 came as a bit of a surprise, as bishop c5 in the fourth move was played by Ju Wenjun in their fifth game battle. So yeah, bishop g5 does strike me as a little bit surprising because, as you pointed out, it's not a pin, right? The bishop on e7 protects the knight on f6. But I wonder if, it's a bit of a waiting game here, right? So now if bishop g4, we haven't castled kingside yet. So h3, bishop h5, g4 is still on the menu. So just kind of a little bit of a waiting game here as you try to figure out where your opponent is going to develop her light square bishop.
Yeah, I totally agree. Bishop g4, h3, and the same kind of question comes into play, especially in this type of pawn structure. I remember reading this very old book by Max Erver called The Middle Game. I can't remember whether it's part 1, part 2, but he talks about this pawn structure, and he talks about how it's all to do with the flexibility and the pawn breaks. Like, for instance, you have d3, d4, that's one, and then you have f2, f4. And one of the downsides of putting the bishop on g5 is, say you have complete control over d4, you can actually get complete control over f4 as well. And if you can manage this with some, even going h6 and g5, then you have a nice grip on the position. Everything is to do with control and stopping those pawn breaks. And it's exactly the reverse for, if that's the case for black, it's also the case for white. These two sides are looking at breaking out. So black can also do it with bishop e6 as well, trying to open up the line.
Yeah, bishop e6 looks like a really enticing move, but knight 5 for white in the chat. Well, that would not be a good move, because if knight 5, bishop e7 takes e7, a little switchback tactic. But that said, it is black's move, so it's black to play. And what are you predicting? You're predicting bishop e6. That's a move.
Bishop e6, bishop g4. I'm predicting something. I have to confess, again, these positions are very, very complicated, because when the bishop is not in e7, you're always thinking about getting bishop e6 in, and sometimes you do it immediately, and sometimes you prepare it. You put a rook on e8 and you go bishop e6, and then you try to take on e6 with the piece. But here it would be an interesting idea just to completely challenge the light squared bishop. And as mentioned by you, I have to show this idea that knight d5 maybe not the best idea, because you have these knight takes d5 ideas, and this person is loose. You could easily drop a piece, for instance, after bishop takes bishop, and oops, the knight retreats backwards and captures the bishop. That's a very important tactical idea to have up your sleeves and to be aware about it at all times. And we're not going to see that. So bishop e6, it's again an interesting dilemma. Do you capture the bishop, or do you just let that bishop stand firm on c4 and instead just make a move like castles and say, well, if you're going to trade, bishop takes bishop. So say, for instance, here I have the analysis board, and the players are thinking. We have ideas like this.
Now, keep in mind also that there's sometimes some moves with that bishop on g5. It could be tactically vulnerable, right? You always have to look at a move like knight takes e4, right? With the idea that if bishop e7, knight takes e3, and there's this flurry of exchanges that in this case would be good for black. But you did see the bar go up and down. Why is that? Why do you think that is, chat? Try to figure it out yourself. Well, I'll tell you, okay? If we go back a few moves, you got to keep in mind the fact that all captures are possible. So if knight e4, white can play knight takes e4, and now that bishop on g5 is protected twice, and white just goes up a piece. But it's a tactical device that you got to be really aware of. Because, for instance, if black plays h6 and you play bishop h4, hey, maybe this line suddenly works for the black pieces.
Yeah, and we could very well see this, because we do see bishop e6 being played. So we could see a move like after castles. I think that's kind of typical of Lei Tingjie. She plays very direct chess. After h6, that is the big question, right? Do you step back with the bishop? Because, sorry, hang on, bishop takes bishop. I'm kind of a newbie at controlling the board, so you'll have to bear with me. Knight takes bishop, takes bishop, and whoops-a-daisy. Okay, the pawn takes bishop, and now h6. It's
right.
Is your tactic in play?
I think it is. Bishop h4, knight takes e4. I think is in play. Yeah. So I think bishop takes f6 and knight d5 might be something that we see instead. Or of course, you could also retreat the bishop the other way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But where? Yeah. Because bishop e3 allows the nagging knight g4, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I think probably I like your idea of just going bishop takes knight, and then just sticking a knight into d5, and then piling up on the half open d line. It feels like this is quite a nice position for white. At least it's easy to play.
Yeah, more comfortable for white. Remember, very, very close positions often favor those knights. And here there would be not a single pawn traded. Very close, very attractive for the white knight on d5, as opposed to that bishop on f6, which is no great shakes.
And I just saw a question in chat asking about these double pawns. And yeah, optically, you know, you always judge double pawns, not necessarily by how they look, but whether they can move. And yeah, they can't move. But there's something more at stake, and that is the half open D line. And also access for this knight to d5. So you can just imagine a scenario where the queen does move to e2, the rook comes to d1, and then there's nice pressure. And let's not forget that this knight also has some flexibility. Oh, and what are we seeing? I think we saw bishop takes, bishop played. So let me just refresh and get to... Oh no, bishop takes knight played. And after bishop takes knight, knight to d5. So a similar idea, but again, Lei Tingjie keeping the question open. What is she going to do with the king?
Right. Well, yeah, it is quite instructive to see how she delays castling here. I don't want my son to see this game. My 6-year-old is getting super into chess, and he sometimes forgets to castle, though. But when the great players do it, they always have a really good reason. And here we noticed that a big reason for delaying castles was just to make that bishop g4 move less saucy, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And yeah, that's the problem with modern day chess, right? Is that no one is castling. They're all kind of doing king f1 and h4. But you know, they're getting out the rook in some ways. But I would often advise that, not necessarily against it, but you know, you need to think about how you're going to connect the rooks, and it's not just about king safety. And knight d5 played, and it's an interesting kind of dilemma. Well, not dilemma, but it's a kind of scenario on the board, because I'm wondering what Lei Tingjie's idea is. You know, does she want to just simplify the position, clarify it, because she's looking ahead to the playoffs? Because not that many games left. And also, is she trying to gain something with the knight coming to d5? Because at the very least, Ju Wenjun could just say that knight on d5 is just very strong and I'm gonna get rid of it, which is something I would be tempted to say as well. And then we would have a situation with opposite colored bishops on the board. What do we think about that? Or are you a big fan of the bishop pair and maybe you want to go bishop e7?
I am a big fan of the bishop pair, but this particular bishop on e7 is not one that you're going to really be as happy about. I do think that there's a very high chance for playoffs, Jovi, not just because of this opening, but just because of the players. I mean, think about it. If you're confident that you're a great player, and I think both of these ladies are very confident that they are going to win the match. And so you want to take it to a playoff so that you get more games, right? The more games, the better player is more likely to win. So I don't necessarily think they're playing for quick draws, but I think they both have this attitude for different reasons. Lei Tingjie, because she's in great form, because she's young and hungry. Ju Wenjun, because she's won so many championships. She knows what it's like to be under stress and win anyway. They both think, I can do it if I get into the playoff. I think there's a high chance that both of them are looking forward to that rather than dreading it. And I think that's the key to their championship success, that you don't fear that stress, you embrace it.
Yeah, that's very, very key. But at the same time, this is the Women's World Championship match, and of course there's like a battle on every single level, because Lei Tingjie might be happy with the playoffs, but Ju Wenjun might not be. Let's say she might be, you know, we've seen her time and time again just extend the game and just say, you know, if she has a small advantage, she will press it through. She wants to tire out her young opponent, maybe make her nervous. How do you kind of cope with all the mind games and all the overthinking that goes on?
Yeah, well, I mean, right now they're focused on this game, but the chat is asking a lot of questions about the possibility of that playoff. Yes, it would be a day after the 12th game at the same time, and it would be a very lengthy battle because it would start with 4 rapid games, and it would be quite a treat to see that. I think that if we see that, we're going to be in for some really crazy chess and huge surprises. Somebody just asked, I thought that we wanted to keep the light squared bishops on the board.
Yeah.
So
there is that issue, but that was in the traditional kind of Italian, and here we have a kind of different situation. So now you know the rules. You do have to be a bit flexible with your thinking, and you have to just basically assess the value of this knight. Is this knight on d5 going to be a thorn in your side? If it is, you get rid of it. I tend to always believe in being possessive about your own half. You say the first 4 rows, they belong to white. the 8 and 5, black can have them. And then you just fight for those squares with all you can. And if a piece enters there, you have to assess whether it's dangerous, whether you can play around it. And this is the big thing that Ju Wenjun is considering, because yeah, it is true. You do want to keep your light square bishop on the board, but if this knight is going to be an inconvenience, a hassle, after all, it's threatening this bishop on f6, and this bishop on f6 might have all the potential. There's also the possibility, that this knight is just simply tying down also the c6 knight. So you can kind of also, again, see a situation that after bishop takes bishop, bishop takes, that there's a lot more freedom in black's position. Say, for instance, you want to go queen to d7, or you can step the king out and then perhaps prepare some kind of f5 pawn breaks. There's also just freestyling here, but if you do want to chase away that bishop, you can first of all protect the b7 pawn, or maybe you don't even need to, and just go knight to e7 and start driving white black back. And then it's all about creating those targets and creating the momentum. But certainly it's going to be all about the long term.
That's really interesting position, Jovi, because I think the bishop on d5 is excellent here. It's a beautiful bishop, but the problem is that it's not really supported by any of its colleagues, right?
Right.
So it's just like you can't really harmonize to do anything with it. And then you have all these great ideas of like king h8, bishop e7, f5, knight e7. So yeah, kind of an instructive position that just, well, I guess it's the opposite of what your grandmaster friend said. Your bishop is great, but you can't do much about it.
Exactly. Also, I just, there's one game in the database and they got to this position and they just went knight e7. So for instance, knight e7, so the bishop takes b7. Yeah, okay, it might be a move. But after rook to b8, the b2 pawn is dropping. And of course, the bishop can't go back to d5 because the knight is covering that square. So there's all sorts of ideas in the air. And when it comes to bishops of opposite color, so for instance, if you don't take on b7 and instead you drop the bishop back to a2, it's going to be all about the power of the bishop. Just as my grandmaster friend said, if it's a good piece, then great, white will be better. But if it's a bad piece or is not doing anything, then black finds a way to kind of maybe go king h8 or g6, bishop g7, and try to get f5 in. I'm a big fan of f5, or maybe he's trying to get for c6 or d5, or just block out this bishop. Then there's no reason why white is better. So very interesting position so far. And everyone's asking who that GM friend is.
Well, it's funny, Jovi, because when you said grandmaster this time, I thought you said grandma. You're like, my grandma said that. and if you think about it, how many grandmasters are there who are also grandmas? I mean, I'm not totally sure but definitely a few. The Georgian women, for sure. There's got to be a couple there. I think like Nona. No,
just really, yeah.
Are you going to tell us who this grandmaster is?
Okay, I can say it's a co-commentator. So there you go. You got a long list.
All right.
And he's very good. He's very good at the e4, e5 position. So I will let you. All come to the conclusion. I've already told you it's a he. So clues
abound. Chat. Kind of get it. Okay, we got Simon. Okay.
Ginger GM would be like grandmaster friends recommends h2 h4. And then you know. Actually, Simon is a great guy to follow if you just want to kind of, if you need to improve, sharpen your play, and everyone is going, how, maybe. Maybe not. No, he's an exceptional player, and he's off to play in the World Cup I think that's happening in a few days' time. And so we will all wish him the best of luck. It would be awesome, right? If our very own David Howell goes through and gets a spot in the candidates.
And here we see Ju Wenjun, a close-up on Ju Wenjun as she looks to gain equality in this game. Does she already have it? Question, as the opening has seen a lot of very, very solid play. Yeah, GM Canty, says Charlie.
Canty's an awesome guy. And 9 moves in. And big decision for Ju Wenjun. Does she trade that knight in the middle of the board, or does she let it stand and preserve her bishop pair? Well, that is Ju Wenjun's question. And one question that we will have to wait until after the break to get it answered. So don't go anywhere. You won't want to miss this Game 11 game match. Okay, see you in a few minutes.
This course is about white playing d4, all the tools you need to get an advantage with white and not be tricked early in the opening. Now, it has a really long, complicated name that I'm going to mispronounce now, so you can make fun of me. Okay, don't make fun of me too much. I'm trying to help you here. It's called the Chelyabinsk variation, and I'm probably mispronouncing Chelyabinsk. That's why I call it the A6 Slav.
My goodness, knight d8?
Whoa. Bishop d5 with mate. Fantastic.
Mate! He voted mate!
Chance, look, f7. Whoa, no!
I didn't think about winning or defending the goal. I just think we're still a strong team, and hopefully we can play our best.
And we are back, and there we see Ju Wenjun, the current women's world champion, and not just the world champion, she's also a three-time back-to-back women's world champion, first winning the title in 2018 and then defending her title just a few months later in a completely different format in the Knockout World Championship, and then she defended her title against the young upcomer Aleksandra Goryachkina, and now she's here in Chongqing, this amazing mega city, to do it all again. And she has the black pieces. This is game 11, and there, with 5 points apiece, nothing can separate her from her challenger. But in this position, still a big decision to be made, and we see Ju Wenjun in thought as to whether she should remove that knight from d5, take it off the board, or should she find another way to handle the position and perhaps preserve that bishop pair. And we see her deep in thought. And one of the things about Ju Wenjun and also Lei Tingjie, I have to say, is that both women, they use their time very wisely. They consider all their options. She's not afraid to burn 20 minutes on making a decision. We also saw in game 10 how she used 20 minutes to actually take back a move. She retreated her knight to back where it came from, and it was in fact the best move. And well, it's all going to hinge on who has the better bishop, as we see there from chat.
Well, I think also something about this position, which really struck me when you were showing the variations at bishop e5, bishop takes d5, it really struck me that it's actually the white knight on f3. It's not that good. Because, you know, you see the knight on c6, e7, d4 potentially in some positions, whereas the knight on f3, like, what does it do? Like, if you could catapult it to f5, you know, maybe that would be nice. But it really doesn't do a heck of a lot on f3, and that's one of the reasons why, despite the beautiful light squared bishop, white doesn't have a lot of juice in this position.
Yeah, it's definitely very, very tense. For instance, like you say, you know, this is something that Ju Wenjun will be evaluating, you know, the strength of the pieces and also the long-term prospects, because don't forget, the position is very close. And if you do step back with a knight to e7, then you know, white's plan could be d4, could be f4, could be expanding as far as they go on the queen side, you know. These are the things that are just whirling through Ju Wenjun's head. Also, she could be thinking, if we go back to the game position, that actually she quite likes the bishop pair, and she might be looking at moves like g6. She might even be thinking, well, if you can put your knight on d5, this is the computer's top suggestion, by the way, just to put the knight on d4.
Right.
I mean, this is also a plan, and with our familiar friend of putting the bishop on g4. And take your time, Ju Wenjun, make the correct decision. Make the decision. In this particular situation, it has to be a decision that favors your style and that you're going to be most comfortable with. And Ju Wenjun now to under 1 hour and 10 minutes on the clock, and we just only played 9 moves.
We got a question from the chat that they missed the start. What opening was this? Well, it is a Joko piano that we had today. The same game, or the same opening, that is, that Lei Tingjie won her sole victory of the match so far in Game 5. This one, however, has shaped out a little bit differently because Ju Wenjun deviated as early as move 4. So that's the opening we have today. I think she's going to play bishop takes d5. That's my prediction. Because some of those positions that you were showing us, Jovi, did look quite fun for Black without a lot of worries. We should point out, because I noticed that a lot of players make mistakes of all levels, but particularly newer players. They make mistakes when there are options of captures, right? So after bishop takes d5, some people might think, I should take with the pawn and attack that knight on c6. Free tempo, right? But you get one tempo, but at the cost of that light squared bishop on c4 forever being weakened. And Jovi's grandmaster friend would be very disappointed here in the bishop on c4.
And they would be using the British very, very disappointed. I'm sorry. I just love making that sound. If you want to sound super smart or super funny. And Jennifer, you called it. And I was actually just going to piggyback on your point. And I was going to say, one of Ju Wenjun's strengths, as well as her weaknesses, is that often she will trade pieces. She can't quite handle the tension in certain positions. And her instinct is to make that capture. And it's happened. And we didn't see knight e7, which was the game that I had there on my database, but instead Ju Wenjun has played the more active bishop to b4 with very much the same idea. And Ju Wenjun, not Ju Wenjun, but Lei Tingjie, I can just see in the camera. She's just like looked to the clock and she looked to that direction and she was like, what is that knight doing in my half? It was unexpected to me. I was expecting knight e7, but knight b4 played quickly. And bishop takes pawn is not going to happen, I can guarantee that, because rook to b8. And questions will be asked about this b2 pawn, and the light squared bishop will disappear from the board. That's not really what you want. So I'm expecting bishop b3.
Right, bishop b3, and that does ask the knight on b4. Well, you are going to be ousted with a move like c3 in quick succession. So bishop b3 followed by c3. And then what is your plan for that knight on b4? You kind of just have to go back to c6, right? Because a6 doesn't look like that exciting of a square. So I'm actually
happy might be about the idea, though.
It could
to go
be
a6 and go c5.
Right? But it seems like we're going to gain so many tempi as white, right? Because we're going to get d4 in at some point too.
Oh, well, this is exciting, isn't it? So hang on a second. So say we go, I don't know what to do, but you don't want to put your knight back to c6. That's because otherwise white's kind of got this bishop on b3 just for free. So say we go knight a6, just to go knight c5, and after c3, and this knight. What is happening here?
Right,
that's the idea. And this is where I've been advised by Dania, by Alexandra and Judith. They say when the pawn structure is about to change or is changing, this is the perfect moment to leave the board, to take a break. Have you heard about this advice, Jennifer? Or is it, to me, it was a surprise. I didn't know that this is the moment where you get up, get a breather, splash some water on your face, come back to the board and just go, right, I've zoomed out, I've refreshed the screen, reset everything, and I'm now willing to play the position that is on the board.
Well, hey, if Alexandra, Judith, and Danya all recommend it, then it's got to be some pretty pretty fantastic advice. That's quite a trio there, Jovi. I love the advice. I love it. And the thing here is my first instinct was like, I like this for white because we're going to get to play d4 with a tempo, but not so fast because our king is in the center. So we do have to be a little bit cautious, right? About getting that right away. Like, can you imagine, even if like black plays, well, I could play rook e8 and just stop you. But even if c6, it could be that there's like a really fun variation. And after d4, we could just take on d4 and then take on e4 and play rook e8. Talk about slashing some water on your face.
That would be quite the rude shock. Okay, so bishop takes knight. This is the idea. Then rook to e8. And whoops, when you try to defend that bishop, say maybe move you with the queen or the knight, then d5 will simply come. And this bishop on e4 will fall because the rook is pinning the king. Yeah, but this is the kind of thing that white could stumble into, and always good to have these ideas in the back of your mind. And Lei putting the jacket back on, she means business, and she will have to play in a business frame of mind if she wants to defeat Ju Wenjun. Ju Wenjun, such a good player. So yeah, so c6, I agree with you. d4, not possible. You'll have to wait for that one more move. And I'm a big advocate, just like you were saying, Jan, of castling. Get the king to safety.
Right. Yeah. Especially now that it looks like the position's going to open up, right? Like we were delaying it when the pawn breaks weren't so obvious. But now that like d5 is coming at us fast, we certainly have to get our king into safety.
Yeah.
So
it's such a tense. I mean, I keep using the word tense, but that's the only word I can think of about these things because, you know, it's all going to hinge on pawn breaks, pawn expansions. The position is still very close. It's not, again, clear whose bishop is better. So if there's knight standing pretty on c5, I would be tempted to kind of go b4, a5, but then you're abandoning d4 ideas and, oops, forget that arrow. And yeah, but you can also see situations where the knight can drop back to e6 and then this bishop also gets out of the way of an f5 pawn expansion, and still anything can happen.
But knight b4,
by the way, I'm obsessed with f5.
Yeah,
I think a lot of us have tendencies, biases towards certain things, and one of mine is simply pushing in the center or pushing f5.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just so multi-purpose, right, Jovi? I mean, you not only the center, but you also get that rook into the game. It just feels so glorious, right?
Yeah. But then I also just looked over and I saw that the computer is also advocating a different plan for black, and that's based on the idea of going g6 and h5. Simon, our ginger GM friend, will be very happy with ideas like this. Again, taking space. And I guess the idea is to put the knight on e6 and then go to knight f4.
Wow, I love that.
Holding firm the center, which again is very attractive. And okay, well, we do have a move. So I am just going to refresh, and bishop b3 was played. And yeah, we see chat. I've never had a grandmaster friend. Yeah, I have a few grandmaster friends, so let's try to name drop them when we can. It's one of the privileges.
Well, they'll be name dropping you as well, Jovi. So yeah, it goes both ways. But this position, the king will not go both ways. This is only a castling kingside position. We're not going to see any queenside castles for white in this case. But is black's move? Do we just move our knight back voluntarily here with knight a6, or do we wait for you to play c3? I mean, I would probably wait for you to play c3 and do something like c6 or. Well, c6 or a5 even, maybe. a5 just to get more space once we play knight a6. By the way, I love your g6 h5 idea. That's awesome. I mean, it's not a super typical idea in this type of structure, but because of the bishop on f6, you see that it's like hard to play h4 and stop the h5 h4 idea, especially once we've castled kingside. And I really like how that plan shows you how important it is to have different ideas in your arsenal, right? Because, if you only have a hammer, well, every problem looks like a nail, right? So this idea of king h8 and f5 is really, really cool. But then you also have this idea of g6 and h5, and suddenly you become like a great player because you're looking at d5, f5, and h5. You're looking at all the aggressive plans. Now that's really great.
And talking about having different weapons in your arsenal, well, we saw g6 h5. That wasn't my idea, that was a computer idea, but I loved it as well, and it was again very relevant when the center is stable. And talking about stable center, well, Ju Wenjun, she has released the tension. She has made her breakthrough by playing d5, and immediately after that move, Lei Tingjie, she gave us a frown, perhaps a surprise to her. So d5, I guess Lei Tingjie just thought maybe it wasn't possible on account of c3, but this is where the idea of counterattacking comes into play, because after c3, if you're forced to kind of retreat the knight, then you lose protection of d5. But pawn takes pawn is Ju Wenjun's idea, and after pawn takes pawn, maybe the knight will come to d3 and give a nice pretty check to the king on e1. And well, we're now in the realm of modern chess, right? King has to go to f1, and then I guess you have to kind of go h4 and get your pieces connected that way. h4, g3, king g2, g2, take control of the only open line on the board. And there's also knight takes. Is that knight takes pawn? I just looked over and the computer suggesting knight takes pawn. I'm like, what? Can you really go into no man's land?
Well, we do have queen d3 check, right? So if you play queen c2 or queen b1, we just have a queen d3 check. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And if you play queen e2, we also have queen d3. So wow. Do we, though? Is there a way to trap us here? Because if you take on d3 here, the knight escapes with knight takes d3 and we're up a pawn. Life is beautiful.
Yeah.
But what if you just play... I don't want to suggest king e1, but I'm trying to find like a waiting move.
Right. You could see a kind of repetition, like queen brick here and then queen e1. No, because the knight gets out to d3. No, the knight gets trapped with knight takes queen. So you could see a repetition like this.
Right.
Okay, but this would be a very rare occurrence in this World Championship because these two players do not do quick draws. So that is why, can I just see a move was played after d5. It's not c3 because of pawn takes pawn, but that is why Lei Tingjie played pawn takes pawn.
E takes d5. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that whole line looked very scary, right? Like allowing taking on e4 and knight d3 check. But it was beautiful to look at. But now we have a more sane, more I don't want to say sane, intuitive, a more intuitive line here for white to take on d5. Not to allow knight to e3 check and takes on e4, and knight takes d5 played by black very quickly, and finally the king gets castled as the position opens up. Now see how that happens? When the position is closed, we can delay castling. As soon as it opens up, we got to get the king out of dodge.
Yeah, and Lei Tingjie, she takes our grandmaster's advices, and the pawn structure has now changed. There's two half open lines on the board. White will have pressure against the e5 pawn. Black will have pressure along the d line, and she gets up and she leaves the board. it's a good idea to always zoom in and zoom out and just to see the bigger picture for a while. And, well, who is more comfortable? That is the question. White has a very nice bishop on b3, pointing at f7. Black has the space. It's got the further advanced pawn with e5, so that controls those square, not that one, those two squares. Knight that can jump into f4 and has better flexibility. The queen can come up to the Goldilocks squares of d6. I always like to kind of, a queen on the 6th row, or for white, the 3rd row, is really good, well placed. And my grandmaster friend, this time I will name drop, Neil MacDonald, he called it the Goldilocks squares, and he'd been studying lots of computer chess, and the engines were always putting their queen on like d6. And the reason why it's Goldilocks, because the queen can actually go forward from this square all the way up the board, and she has the ability to switch from the left to the right very, very easily.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love that phrase, the Goldilocks squares, because it's active. The queen loves to be active, but it's not so exposed that it's going to get hassled too much. Very, very well said. I'm going to remember that. That's a really nice one. By the way, I'm the only one hearing grandma when you talk about your grandmaster friends. You cannot master without grandma.
Grandmaster. Am I saying grandma? I could be my grandma friends. But I would love to have a grandma friend who is actually like grandmaster. But yeah. I'm waiting for those days. But now you got my mind thinking as to any, because there aren't too many, like for instance, Elizabeth Pates, she's part of a father-daughter grandmaster duo. And then we have also Vahidov. I think he's part of maybe his father's international master. I'm not sure whether his father is a grandmaster, but there aren't too many. And of course, the Van Foreys, their brothers, Judith Polgar, and Susan Polgar, the sisters. And yeah, not very nice family duos. And there we have a comment from Fish. Duality says, I prefer white's position ever so slightly, but black's position looks so pretty. Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And I think on account of that dynamic balance, I think the position is level. And first thing I would do if I were black is I would just reinforce this stronghold, and then I would then contemplate my plans.
I agree, but I think I would take the opposite of Fish duality. Partly because he's got fish in his name, and so no, it's okay. It's all right. I think I would take black because I feel like white has the better bishop, but black has the better knight, and it somehow it seems easier for me to play as black. And what you said about the Goldilocks rank with the queen was very appealing to me. Whereas there are some unanswered questions for me for white. Just feel like it's a tiny bit easier to play for black. So perhaps I would take the black pieces. What about you, Jovi? If you had to pick, would you pick black or white?
I think I would pick black, but the words of this grandmaster is always on my head, and this bishop is annoying, right? Because I kind of want to go Rook E8, but at the same time, I've always got to watch out on this protection of the F7 point, and I have a feeling it's just very level. That's my vibe. I'm going to sit on the fence very firmly here. I'm saying neither. Both sides are happy. Everyone is a winner, in the words of the Hot Chocolate song. And does black need to improve her bishop somehow? Yes, that is definitely something that Ju Wenjun will have to deal with. Perhaps not now, because this pawn on e5 does need to be protected. But as soon as this knight moves from f3, as soon as the pressure is off, then Ju Wenjun will be looking at improving her bishop. But again, you've kind of highlighted it. The bishop doesn't have this bishop on f6 doesn't have any great diagonals to go to. I guess, maybe one day go to c5 and then start looking at f2. But that's a big ask. I think for now, just let it sit on f6.
But I have to say, I am actually kind of excited that we got this position, because if you had asked me just a few moves ago, I would think that it would be like the position would be even more balanced. Whereas this one, it might be equal, but there are a few imbalances, right? Like the pawn structure is not completely symmetrical. I talked about the better bishop for white and the better knight for black. The possibility of playing these h5 ideas. So there's a little bit of push and pull in this position, which I might not have expected if, for instance, we just had mass trades on d5 and d4, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And also we see chat suggesting some moves, g6, bishop g7. I like it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I also quite like the modern way of playing chess, which is also about just protecting all your pieces. And you see all these top grandmasters, they literally protect all their pieces and they smile and then they go, look at that. Protection operation. And actually, this is a really, really good strategy when you're short on time. Just protect your pieces. Obviously, take care of your king.
Can't go wrong with that.
And I'm sorry, I'm just laughing because I just see some roasting going on from our producer, Vic. He's saying, my name is Grandmaster.
Grandmaster.
Everyone is laughing at the way I'm saying Grandmaster. Okay, I'll be shorter. I'll stop going Grandmaster.
No, I love it. I think it's fantastic. All the grandmas in the chat say hello. By the way, I just saw a little tactic. I don't know if it works because I didn't check it with the computer, but we talked about how the idea of h5 is a good idea. I just noticed, well, if h5, does white have knight takes e5? Just every opportunity I can to get a little tactical fun in there, I got to check.
Yeah, so just it got h5 now, and is knight takes pawn possible?
I was looking, is it possible with the idea that if bishop takes e5, queen h5, and I got a little skewer minor pieces.
It does look dangerous. Wow. Because I was looking at rook e8, but rook e8 would be not a good move because d4. So it is definitely a tricky idea, but apparently according to the engine, and it's only the engine that's refuting you, not me, bishop takes pawn apparently is the refutation there. That's why it's going up. But definitely a lovely idea. But it's still very much an idea in the position, and bishop takes, then threatening the rook.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, a lot of times these types of tactics don't work. And so the point is to always look at them, not always play them, right? You always want to look at forcing moves and these tactical ideas that you take advantage of loose pieces, but don't always play them. Always look at them.
Yeah, exactly. And even better is if you were to train beforehand. And every morning I've been waking up pretty early and I've been doing my puzzles, not Puzzle Rush, but my puzzles on chess.com. And I find that because of that, I'm able to spot things a lot faster than normal. And when I was at my rating peak, it was because I was doing 50 puzzles a day. So
so let me ask you, you clarified that you weren't doing Puzzle Rush. You were doing the regular puzzles on chess.com.
Yes.
Now, why is that? And do you also do puzzles out of a book or on the board?
No, just on basically on my phone. I get my phone or my iPad whenever I'm on the go. I will try to get my puzzles in. And yeah, it was after a discussion with some grandmasters at the American Cup and lots of grandmas in the room, and they all said to me that actually doing Puzzle Rush, I mean, it's very good, it's very helpful, but at the same time, it's much better just to have that thinking time. And of course, the more you practice on puzzles, the better you get. And the better you get, the more difficult the puzzles are, which means that, you don't just superficially go for the right answer all the time. And you just have thinking time. So at the minute, I'm like 3,300. I don't know if that's good or bad. It sounds good. And yeah, you just do puzzles when you're waiting in line at Disney World. If you're lucky enough to be at Disney World, I'm so jealous, by the way. Do love Disney, and especially the fireworks and the castle.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've got a 6-year-old, so he loves that. And by the way, my 6-year-old does some Puzzle Rush and Puzzle Duel is what they call it on Chess Kid. And I think that my take on it is that it's really good as a barometer for like how you're doing. But if you keep doing it and you don't work on your puzzles in some other fashion, at some point you're just going to reach your wall, and then you're just repeating yourself, right? So it's like, it's good to see, have I gotten better? Have I gotten sharper? But then once you kind of reach your peak, it's time to actually break out some books or do some regular puzzles so that you can continue to grow.
Yeah, definitely. And as you mentioned, you also have to like work on all aspects of your game. You can't just work on your puzzles. You need to pick what. I have this big thing that, things that you like, you can do by yourself because you have the impetus, you have the drive to do that. Things that you struggle with, find friends. If you don't like endgames, okay, some of us don't like endgames, some of us love them. Just find your friends and drag them into solving some endgame studies or just working through those basics, because you'll at least enjoy the company, And I feel that the emphasis should be on having fun. And talking about having fun, we do see that the players have reinforced that stronghold. Ju Wenjun has gone for that modern day principle of protecting every single piece you have, so loose pieces don't drop off. Knight is protected on d5, which means that the queen is released from defending duties, and these two rooks, they are of course hitting and defending the e5 point.
Right, so it's rook e8 and now it's white's move again, and what's our equivalent here for our Goldilocks square? Should we stick our queen on d2 to connect our rooks? Or c1? No, I don't want to do that. Do we still want to play for c3, or do we want to play for a5? A5 seems like a kind of attractive idea for white, because if I get the opportunity to play a6, maybe it could be compelling. What do you think?
I love your a5 idea because it really fits in with modern day chess, because you push your wing pawns as far as they can go, and then you just sit there and you just play for that long-term advantage in the endgame. So say, for instance, you get your pawn to a5, and then you visualize an endgame where pieces are traded off, and if that knight manages to magically appear on c5, you're like, good times ahead. And it's those small little details that can affect the long-term possibilities. Another thing that I've seen lots of lots of top players do is they can try to control the knight circuit, so the knight can jump to f4. So I've seen them go g3, those kind of ideas. Also, I love connecting the rooks. Definitely this is going to be something that is a matter of taste. And talking about a matter of taste, this is something that will take Lei Tingjie some time to decide on. So it's the perfect break for us just to leave Lei Tingjie with her thoughts. There we see her making those choices, and we'll take a quick break and we will join you, because you don't want to miss all the action that is coming up in Game 11 of the Women's World Championship. See you in a few minutes.
Your subscription makes shows like this possible, which is why our Twitch subscribers will never see ads on chess.com. Connect your chess.com account and Twitch account at go.chess.com/connectaccounts, and bang, boom, voila, you're done. 100% ad-free bliss forevermore. Whether you're following our events on site or on stream, type the command connect in the chat, and thank you for helping bring these shows to life.
Yeah, there are a few. I mean, one for sure is interviewing the Holocaust survivor in 1956, French women's chess champion Isabelle Schofel. Started out as a podcast for Ladies' Night in the Grid, And it turned out that I got a chance to travel to Paris and actually meet Isabel herself. That's a little piece that's going to be coming out on chess.com soon. That was just magical. I mean, I'm Jewish, and seeing the rise of anti-Semitism is really disturbing. And to be able to talk to somebody who was almost slaughtered in one of the worst atrocities of all time, but is still living 80 years later, and really not just living, but thriving, like providing so much inspiration to everyone around the world. I mean, it's a magical moment. Like, this is like one of the reasons why we play chess and why we create art, for moments like that. So I feel really lucky to have met Isabel and thankful for that. Also, another moment that really stands out for me was when Judith Polgar visited my US Chess Girls Club. We had hundreds of girls there from all over the world. In fact, we had girls from Kenya. We had girls from, obviously the United States, from Colombia. And we also had adult women there as well. So it was a huge turnout. And Judith was just so charming and brilliant in her answers. In particular, I noticed that a lot of girls asked her similar questions on a variation of like, what do you do if your confidence is shattered? What do you do if you lose a few games in a row? If you're scared, if you don't know what to do? And it's funny because Judith's like, because I've always been so confident. And she did manage to reply, but it was interesting to me to see that was a bit of a struggle for her, because she has always had that confidence that she was great. She hasn't suffered from imposter syndrome. And I think that's a big secret to her success, and just a reminder of how important confidence is to becoming the best chess player that you can be.
We're just waiting on Lei's choice here.
Oh no! She didn't play that!
Kudos to Lei Tingjie for a really, really impressive performance.
Lei Tingjie has won this match. Huge congratulations. What a performance. Great games.
And that's it! Resignation!
That's it!
Lei Tingjie, the winner of the 2023 Candidates Finals. Congratulations to Lei Tingjie and her supporters.
Hello, and we are back in Chongqing, and there we see the challenger Lei Tingjie in action. And what an impressive candidate she has been so far. She's been impressive actually throughout the last years. You know, Aleksandra Goryachkina was reminding us that in 2021 she just had one tournament that she could play, and she chose to play in the Grand Swiss. She won that one so convincingly. She raced to 8 points out of 9, and at the prize giving she was running around saying, when are the dates for the 2022 candidates? Well, when it came to 22, again, just that one shot. And she won the candidates very convincingly, not needing a tie break. And then, of course, in 2023, she defeated her compatriot, also her childhood friend Tan Zhongyi. And she is sitting in this chair. She has the white pieces for the final time. And it is definitely very much challenge on as she faces against Ju Wenjun. And well, we left you with Lei Tingjie taking a decision as to how she should continue, and she went for Jan's idea of just stepping the queens forward and connecting the rooks, upon which Ju Wenjun reacted very quickly with the move rook to e7, and it's definitely a surprising move. And Lei Tingjie once again as well, making those kind of frowns, these grimaces, concentrating hard. She was also caught unawares.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, if I could just stick a knight on e4 in this position, or a knight on c4, I'm really bothered as white by the fact that my knight on f3 is so unpromising here. Now, that does, of course, give me the idea, now that you put your rook on e7 and your bishop and your queen are no longer a battery against the g5 square, what if I play knight to g5 right now? Will you take it, leaving yourself with a knight for a bishop? White seems like they would have a little something there, right?
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, whilst Lei Tingjie is considering what to play, let's have a look. Knight to g5, improve the worst place piece. I approve. And knight e4 is coming, so that does worry me. So maybe I'm going to resort to a move that chat suggested, which was just to make a hiding place for the bishop, put it on g7.
Right, yeah, and then if knight e4, you stick your bishop on g7, and suddenly my knight on e4, not as stable, because you could play for f5. Now f5 does create some weaknesses, but maybe it'll be worth it. And now I wonder if I've overextended. I could look at putting my knight on c5 in these positions, but that rook on e7 now protects b7. So it doesn't seem too promising on that square as well. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. And maybe that is part of the idea behind rook e7, that you're really well poised to play against this idea.
Which does then make that rook e7 is a very impressive idea, because she was considering that the knight could come to e4 and thinking ahead to a knight jump to c5. I was just thinking with a rook on e7, she wants to step the queen forward and maybe even go rook d7. I wasn't quite sure what the idea was. But now all has been revealed, and I like it. So maybe not knight to g5. And what are we seeing? Rook e4.
Ooh, wow. Rook e4. That's an interesting one that we did not expect. So she's looking at just playing rook to e1 and putting pressure on e5. Seems like that would be the idea with this move, right? Just nice and simple. So what do we do against this? What do we do against this simple idea? Like, how are we? Are you gonna? Jovi, earlier you mentioned the Goldilocks rank for the queen being d6, the 6th rank or the 3rd rank. So protecting that pawn another time with queen d6 looks natural.
Let's dive in and explore further. So queen d6, okay, and well, simple is as simple does. I love that film, by the way.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
You've never seen Forrest Gump?
Oh, I have. Sorry, I didn't get. It's been a while. Oh no, I got to rewatch it. So, all right, 1, 2, 3, got it right away. So rook e1 now. You can still play for this g6 bishop g7 f5 idea, and I'm just a little concerned that rook on e4 is going to get kind of pushed back, and black's going to expand the position. So For instance, after rook e1, if we play rook e8 or g6 right away, what's the follow-up idea here for white? Let's see. So should we start with rook e8 or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's start with something. I'm not quite sure. Rook e8 looks kind of a bit weird, but then again, it is defensive. I also quite like your idea of, okay, queen d6 on the board. So we could very well see this happen. And then this is the question. Well, of course, e5 is nicely overprotected. d4 isn't necessarily gonna hit us too hard because this rook, again, stands very well protected by the bishop, by the queen, and the knight. So, do we go rook to e8 or do we just calmly go g6?
Well, rook e1 happens, so we're going to find this out. And I predict Ju Wenjun's going to think a little bit here. Because g6, my concern is that if you play bishop g7, then d4 might come into play. Because if pawn d4, there's bishop takes d5. So maybe we should put some moves on the board just to kind of show that.
Yeah, okay, so g6, and then, okay, so I go c6. I don't know, I'm just picking out some squares. And then you go bishop g7, and then, okay, d4 will happen because of this pressure. And if you go pawn takes pawn, well, that would be a huge mistake, because not because of rook takes rook, but because of bishop takes knight. And then, oops, you can't capture back the bishop because of rook takes rook. And if you were to go rook takes rook, it will be the bishop that recaptures. And oops, you're down a piece.
Absolutely. I like to call that the switchback. So the bishop on d5 removes itself from capture by switching back to taking the enemy piece. And now we end up a piece and completely winning. So g6, it's like if it doesn't actually threaten bishop g7, I wonder if, like, kind of what's the point, right?
But it's a nice safety move anyhow. But say, for instance, I wasn't sure about c3. Maybe we might see a move like h4 on the board. Who knows? They have this rule these days that when you don't know what to do, just go h4.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, hey, I think it applies well here. Yeah, it plays very well.
Makes some space for the king. And okay, well, I guess black will prepare, or maybe might go h5 themselves. I don't know. And I like Inspector Gadget, great cartoon series. Lei probably has prepared something slightly different. Well, we'll see what her idea is with rook e4. To me, it's Jen's suggestion of just doubling on the e-line, putting the pressure on, and maybe doing h4, because we've seen Lei is a very direct player. She plays for the most committal moves, and at times she does let go to that feeling of just let's attack. So we saw that in game 7, where she faced the Karakhan and she said, you know, this is the only chance I'm going to play g2, g4, maybe even in the whole championship match. So let's just go. Let's do it.
Oh, and yeah, rook e8 was played because why not just play that first? Yeah, and now if h4, I mean, you could still play h4 as white, but it's not quite as juicy when there's no pawn on g6 yet. But it could still be a great move nonetheless.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm tempted to play it just because these days this is the move to consider, because it's not necessarily the idea of going h4, g4, g5, blah, blah, blah. Let's go. The idea might be something positional. You just go h4, g3, stick the king on g2, and just, I call it creep up the board. It's very Karpov-Pavian. You know, you just creep up, and maybe this rook will come to h1, and maybe one day you can slowly advance on the king side. Just keep that flexibility, keep your opponent guessing. I love moves like that. When I do them, I feel very smart. And when they work, when they don't work, you can just like, that doesn't work. Next game.
Yeah, it does feel good. It feels good, those Karpovian moves. Completely agree. A move like rook e2 with the idea of queen e1, not really going to do that much here. Not quite enough pressure, I don't think, but still worth looking at. I think the problem is our major pieces are a little bit clumped up. And you probably have like an opportune moment to play knight f4, right?
Yeah. But still, I think the idea is very much in the works because you can do everything, right? This is the type of position where you can go g3 first just to stop your knight f4 idea. Look at that.
There it is.
Played.
Brings a smile to all of our faces. It's that extra cup of coffee, that extra shot of espresso. Out h4. Love to see it.
I also love it as well. And again, asking questions to Ju Wenjun, and it's the kind of move that makes your opponent uncomfortable. So,
we've got people screaming out in the chat, Simon, Harry, Tall. Hey, nice. Judith?
Yeah, Judith's trademark is G2, G4. She's that one. And yeah, it was kind of interesting actually how chess has evolved through the ages, because I remember Simon many moons ago was going h2, h4, and everyone was kind of going, yeah, okay, Simon, that's a little bit too much. And now everyone is doing it. And yeah, we have h2, h4 on the board. And remember, the idea might not necessarily be to pawn storm the king side just yet, but it's just to creep up the board, maybe with g3, maybe with king g2, and maybe also in conjunction with the idea that Jan mentioned, which is just to line up all three pieces on the e line, put the rook on e2, queen in e1, pressure on the e5 point.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, we got a comment from chat. What about from Chaydoc, who says, what about g4 YOLO? And it's actually, it is a good question because, I mean, shockingly, Chaydoc is a good friend of mine. But after g4, you are threatening g5, simply winning a piece. So, Jovi, is this a case of a moment of pleasure with a big threat for a lifetime of weaknesses?
Well, this is actually something that I wanted to ask you about, because G4 I wouldn't necessarily recommend, just because, you can't undo those pawn moves. And I love pushing pawns because I would be very hesitant about giving up the F4 square. But on the other hand, I wanted to ask you about risk taking, because now we're coming to game 11. And if you make a mistake, that could be it. You could just completely lose the match just based on that one error. So how much risk should one take to push for that win?
Question. That's a wonderful question. And I do think it ties into how you think your chances are in the playoff. And I believe both players are confident in the playoff, so that will tie into a little bit less risk taking, which I think you saw in the opening choice today. That said, once the game is played, the players are looking for the best moves and most combative moves, so they're not agreeing to a short draw here. But I do think that both players are keen on that playoff. They're okay with that outcome, and that will affect some of the risks that they take in these last two games.
Yeah, and how do you also kind of assess the risk for your opponent as well? Because I guess that's also something that when you're playing poker, you're not just thinking about your own chances, you're thinking about your opponent as well, their chances, you're working out the probabilities, and it's complicated.
It is that psychology of trying to put yourself in your opponent's shoes. And the hardest part of that is, like, sometimes when I'm thinking about life or chess or poker, when I put myself in my opponent's shoes, I'm still thinking about the situation as if it was me in their shoes. But that's not what it is. It's what you need to be thinking about is if it's them in their shoes. And that is, of course, far harder. By the way, we do see h5 on the board. Now, the one thing I noticed about this move right away is that it makes the possibility of sticking a knight on g5 more compelling. Because one thing is that there's no h6s just to kick me out. And secondly, the idea that you were combating me with before was like g6, bishop g7, and f5. Not as compelling as well, now that you also have the move h5 in.
Yeah, exactly. Like you mentioned, the G5 square, you've considered it, and you got to care about those squares. I still haven't managed to figure out the rhyme. If anyone is really good at rhyming, I want care and square, and I want to make a sentence out of that.
All right, chat, you've got a challenge.
You got to care about the square. That's all I've come up with so far. But yeah, I completely agree with you there. H5, definitely to stop any kingside expansion, but it comes at a cost. And there's a big one of allowing white that square on G4. And yeah, it's definitely Ju Wenjun being careful, but I agree with you. The first thing that comes to mind is like G3, don't pull out your hair, just care about the square. Yeah.
All right. Who said that?
That's one from H34L5. Like I'm thinking at the back of my mind, one of these days I will write something or do a course on these rules. And then at the end, I have these little rules in life and in chess. And at the end of it, I will say, now you know them, go break them.
Well, I have to say, Jovi, you do have the greatest range of writing in, I think, chess history. You've got a book on the Scandinavian and you've got a chess erotica novel. So you basically have a chess erotica novel and then the opposite of chess erotica, the Scandinavian. So your range is just quite impressive. But both books fantastic. I just
thank you.
The mating
Thank
game.
You. But talking about books, you have some really good books, and actually I don't have the first one, Chess Bitch, but the first one when my niece started playing chess, the first book I got her was Play Like a Girl, because I think that's such an important topic in chess, and it's so important that girls see other women playing chess and seeing some great moves that everyone has played. Little Yovi, the next best rapper in the game. Yeah. No, I think the rapper goes to Canty, GM Canty. He's the best when it comes to things. And whenever he does these expressions, I'm making note, like, we off to the races. I love that. And Switchback, I'm borrowing that one as well. And you're taking all the credit for that. And the Roving Rook. Whenever you were the big inventor of the Roving Rook, Jennifer.
Oh yeah, the rover, rook up and over. It's like it's a little bit of a combined word there, but yeah, Play Like a Girl. And I actually just wrote a book called Play Like a Champion, which is going to be out later this year. I think the idea that we can learn as much from women's games, we can be as inspired from women's games as from games from anyone. And I know that when I was a little girl looking at chess books, there were so many books that didn't have a single game by a woman, and it matters. And I think that it's starting to change. There's a great Twitter account on the Queen side that is always highlighting all the great women's chess tactics that are happening every day. So we've got the Women's World Championship going on right now, but it seems like every time you turn your head, there's, Alice Lee playing in some major event and crushing grandmasters. There's so many women's tournaments and series. There's a lot of women's chess action here on chess.com, both in like the Pro Chess League, the Speed Chess Champs. So we can really teach students basics of the game from games from women, from games from men. And it's nice to see that change, that more people are respecting the games of women. And in fact, Jovi, there's a big story that's come out in the last few weeks that Norway Chess is going to create the first tournament ever where there's going to be an open event and a women's event, and the women's event is going to have the same prize fund as the open, and it's quite a generous one indeed. And
it's super generous. I love this idea. I really do. And I think it's time that we kind of stop with the constraints of the rating. I think if you abandon that idea and you're just like, okay, let's just have a tournament, the open and the women, and have the same prize fund and give the opportunity for girls to see other women in action. And also by having such a big prize fund, it means that it is more viable for a woman to make this a career, Because at the minute, when you have much lower prize funds for women, it's really not possible for women to actually earn money from playing chess, because you have a situation where they're teaching on the side. And I know so many women top women who are teaching on the side. And I also learned that a lot of the top women players are not getting their training camps paid for. In fact, they all have to pay for their trainers out of their own pocket. I certainly did. I didn't get any support. And if you want the women to get better and there isn't enough women playing chess to have a community, then it is a problem. It is a problem because it's a vicious cycle. You're not going to get the same ratings if you're not being able to dedicate the game in the same way. And we do see G3 being played. And just one thing I really wanted to mention is that we really do need to increase the numbers, because one of the big differences I see between men and women is that the men, because they're able to hang out with their friends, they're playing Blitz all the time. They're playing online with their friends. They're playing over the board with their friends. With the girls, I mean, I have a memory of you and me playing Blitz at the World Juniors, and that was great. We were playing against each other and we were playing as friends. And that was super helpful for my confidence, and it was super helpful for all of us. And that's what I want to see. I want to see that the participation rates increase so much that women can just hang out, play chess, and just learn by playing. And I think this is where men have the advantage. And
I do.
Prize funnies.
And sorry, I wanted to let you finish your point.
Yeah, no, I just want to say, and if it's increased prize money and it's increased prize visibility, I think this is only a good thing. And I know there's a lot of naysayers, but let's face it, it's just one tournament. I don't understand. I really don't understand the objection to this.
Oh yeah, I love to see women get money. I mean, that's one of my philosophies in life. Good people who are working hard and getting money. It's a brutal world out there, so I like to see them stack it up. That's for sure. And yeah, actually, it's really interesting that you mentioned the Blitz and the rapid thing, because I believe that that's true as well. That one thing that makes it a little bit more difficult for women is that social aspect. And I remember those games from the World Junior in Armenia. I do remember the Scandi, executing the Scandinavian against me. But there was a study actually by a woman. Her first name is Miriam. Her second name escapes me right now, but I can find it later.
Is it Bilal?
Well, she's a PhD who does a lot of studies, psychology studies on like gender and chess. And I think one of them showed that women are comparatively weaker at rapid and blitz as they are. So another way of saying is that they're good at classical. So that's one thing I always like to do. I like to flip things. So it's like you say that women are weak at rapid. What does it really mean? It means, well, that they're better at classical, right? Yeah. So, but why is that? And what you mentioned, these kind of like these parties where people play blitz all night. Women are sometimes left out of that kind of sphere, that kind of world. And hey, I guess we need more blitz parties for women. That's the conclusion, Joey.
I mean, totally. I mean, really, it is. I mean, one of the reasons I became so strong is because you probably have the same experience. You were playing blitz against your brother, and he was doing that on a regular basis. Every night he would go, come on, let's play blitz. And we would play for hours. And I was learning on the fly, and he would mock me relentlessly, and I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna get you. And then, it really helped me. And for a while, I actually got to quite high levels in blitz, but that was only on the back of this training. And I kind of want to see it for everyone. And in the meantime, we've had I should let you kind of chip in on this point.
Oh yeah, blitz, absolutely. Well, classical was always more of my forte, but it was indeed those battles that I would play with friends at chess camps and whatnot that increased my blitz level. And I think that's really important when you're coming up, because it gives you confidence. If you can win against higher rated players in blitz, you know that they miss stuff in classical as well. And by the way, the name of that professor is Miriam Domagani. So you could look her up. She's got a ton of studies about like chess, gender, psychology. So really interesting stuff. Now, what's going on here in the position? I feel like I've got, it's like the 5 major pieces on the E file. We do see that there's a tripling, but it wasn't rook, rook, queen. It's rook, queen, rook, right? Now, is D4 on the menu here? Is there any kind of threat of D4 coming? Or is it just...
Not yet,
No.
but it's definitely something that black has to consider. So D4, this rook is just overprotected by this bishop, but I wonder whether other ideas are at play. So for instance, you know, the piece that you've been obsessed about, I just wonder whether you could reroute it to D2 and then C4 and then still increase the pressure, and then the queen can come to F3. Whether we're going to see small moves like King G2. At the minute, this is just a big standoff on E5. Don't see any immediate.
But there's still that point that remains that black kind of wanted to stick the bishop on G7 to give themselves a little bit of more possibilities of playing like F5 or knight F6. But there's always that worry that once you put the bishop on G7, D4 becomes an issue, right? Because then all of a sudden you are underprotected on E7. So definitely, like, I feel like white got a little bit more out of this than I would have expected, Jovi. Like, this is more pleasant for white, I'd say.
This is more pleasant for white, but you're right though. I mean, it's not easy. So say for instance you were to go, I'm not sure about bishop G7, because bishop G7 I always feel that maybe a D4 is going to come at you faster than you know, because of this weak defender on D5 and all the tactics there. So I'm just wondering if you wait, I don't know how to wait, I'll be honest with you. I'm not quite sure what white is planning. So say, I don't know, go King G7 just for something.
Sure.
And what is white doing? Is knight D2? Is knight D2 the idea? And then,
I like that.
I like that too, but then I was thinking, actually, what is white's plan?
Well, that's the thing about bishops of opposite color, because the pawn on E5 is, you know, presumably some kind of weakness. But the thing is, it's difficult to attack it enough times because you're the only one with a dark squared bishop, right? Or Ju Wenjun is the only one with a dark squared bishop. So it's like we can attack it 4 times, but it's very easily defended 4 times as well. And we can't really attack it 5 times.
No, we can't. We can't kind of pile on the pressure. I'm not seeing a role for this bishop on B3 either. And okay, so King G7 wasn't played by Ju Wenjun, but I do see that she played the move A6. Do you know, this pawn structure always reminds me, and I've said it time and time again, of my father. So my father, you know, he was the big impetus behind my chess career. He decided from a young age that, you know, his children would play chess. And initially it was just going to be my brother, but then he found out that I was pretty good as well. So he would always choose the most unfortunate times to study chess. Like he'd suddenly be like, Christmas Day, right, let's study chess. And so he would gather me and my brother and we'd be forced to learn chess. And I was like, I could have really killed him because I wanted to watch TV. I wanted to watch the movies. But okay, I was doing chess. But during one of these sessions, probably during Easter, I remember him reading some book from Botvinnik, and I remember him talking about these pawns. And for some reason, it's always stuck with me. And he goes, this, according to Botvinnik, is the weakest structure of pawns, because if this pawn comes to A5 they can't move. They're easily restrained. And since then I just remember the triangle, because he called it the triangle. It's so bad. And yeah, okay, so this is a long-term point, and you can just imagine in an endgame if the white king were to come into B6, you know, you'd totally understand his thinking. And yeah, but Ju Wenjun, obviously, she won't keep the pawns on A6, B7 and C6 for long. She has a plan. Is she perhaps planning to play B5 and see some space that way?
Yeah, b5. I like the way that it stops me from that idea of knight c4. So that definitely has a benefit. And yeah, I guess that pawn triangle, maybe that contributed to you loving these openings where you get all the light square control, like the Scandi and the Carol Khan. I feel like when I was a kid, I must have been more interested in the dark squares, which is why I like the Sicilian and the dragon. But yeah, you got the light square bug there with the Caro, which you also wrote a book on, right?
I did, yeah. I know, totally. I've been playing the light square strategy for a long time. I remember it was my brother laughed at me nonstop, and then when one of the English women's captains, he also laughed at me. He's like, "You and your light square strategy," and I'm like, "Yeah, I know. What can I do? It works so well. Put your pawns on c6, d5, and get the light square bishop out. You're sorted." And okay, I'm being simplistic, but you get my gist. Sometimes you find your calling on the board, and that opening is mine.
Yeah, it's like openings are a matter of taste. By the way, somebody really wants to see en passant. And luckily I think we can honor the request here, because if a5 happens as white, b5, no, b5 not a good move. I don't think so, but it does allow for us to see this en passant move. Pawn takes b6. So there you got it. High Fantasy has been looking for that.
That was the en passant, the special pawn move. I've never really understood the point of it, but okay, it is in existence, and definitely you should be aware of this special pawn move. And also castling, when you think about it, doesn't really make that much sense.
Well, we could get rid of castling, but if we get rid of en passant, there'd be too many draws. Because I think, as soon as somebody puts some pressure on you with the pawns, you could just bypass it and lock up the position. Less liquidity is going to be more draws, I think. So I'll give you castling, but we got to keep en passant. Even though it doesn't happen that often, it's kind of like embedded in every position, right? It disallows certain lockups.
It's interesting actually how chess has evolved throughout the ages, and how there were like some rule changes, some pieces changed their roles. Like I think before queens could only move one square, and suddenly she became more powerful. And it will be. I wonder in the future what will be the next. Maybe they'll expand the board. Maybe once it's been solved, right? Say for instance, they might go, okay, right. 8x8 has been solved, so maybe we're going to make it 9x9 and add a new piece or something.
Well, we did have a Capablanca chess, which I think is a bigger board, but also there's the possibility of Fisher Random. There's some of the little tweaks that AlphaZero tried in cooperation with Vladimir Kramnik. So yeah, you mentioned it earlier. No castling chess could be a possibility. But for now, it does seem that there's still a lot of juice in classical chess using the iconic position. And especially when you have extra pressure like these two women do, because you know that you can't just draw infinitely. At some point, the time control is going to get faster, and somebody's going to go down, and somebody's going to be crowned women's world champion.
Totally. And one thing about these two women, we have seen that they are tough competitors. Both of them have suffered a loss, and both of them have managed to stay stable, just make things stable and just bounce back from this. Because, I mean, just take the World Championship match between Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi. After Game 6, that was it. Nepomniachtchi was just a completely different person, and he was completely broken. And that hasn't happened here at all. And then, of course, we had this year's World Championship match where it was backwards and forwards. There's so much emotion there. And a6 on the board. And I agree with you. I think we are looking at a very tense, very cagey position. Maybe the players are thinking about the long game. Maybe they're already thinking about what to do. Well, the teams certainly are, at least if they get to a tie break. And in the meantime, 20 moves played.
So a6 on the board, and I mentioned this move a5, which is, by the way, probably a bad one because it weakens not because of b5, which is a bad move allowing for en passant, but the move a5, we were considering it earlier, but now I wouldn't be as excited about playing it necessarily because I'm a little worried about that pawn on a5 becoming a weakness rather than a strength. What do you think, Joby? Do you think that that's on the menu?
I don't think a5 is on the menu because it doesn't have any backup, and I would also be incredibly hesitant about making this move because, I mean, just visually, you take a look and you say my bishop is on the light squares, their strength is the dark square bishop. That one can come back and pounce on this pawn. So I would... Again, I would be very cautious against advocating a pawn on a5. Maybe if the bishops are off the board, maybe if they're just knights and the queens are also off the board, you can see a situation where a5... Ah! Did I just see it being played? Is that my mistake?
I know. I think you are right. I think it was played. The commentator's curse. She'll never play a5. It's such a weak...
Oh man, I keep falling into this. I mean, it's like I'm goaded into it and I can't help myself. No, it will never happen. No, she will 100%. And I can see, boom, let's go. Wow. Okay. She's playing a5. I was like, it's not going to happen. I would be very hesitant. Yeah. I don't learn my lesson like a fool. What can I say? And okay, now that I'm a bit more objective,
it's all right.
I can see it is risky. It is risky because, of course, it's on the same color complex as the bishop. But she has a concrete idea in mind. She wants to move the knight to d2 and c4. And support the pawn on a5. But, wow.
Now, by the way, one of the things that's interesting about this idea of knight d2 to c4, as you point out, that would protect the a5 pawn and also kind of like just really cement the strong knight, which I've been struggling with all game. But there is a negative of playing knight d2 to c4. Remember that you were always unable to play bishop g7 and f5 because I had d4. But I feel like if I move my knight away, now I'm not sure that whole idea will work because e5 is just like so well protected. And I wonder if that might be part of this as well. So let's try. So still bishop g7, you have d4 right now. But let's say black plays, for instance, queen c7 to keep an eye on that pawn on a5. Now, what happens here? Can we get away with playing knight d2 and then if queen a5, knight c4?
Knight d2? Immediately the pawn grabber immediately, okay, let's take it.
Yeah, and now if knight c4, queen c7, and everything is protected, right? And d4, not a thing. You can just take it, right?
So you have to defend. You do have to, after queen c7, I feel like you have to defend this.
Here, then you could add pressure to that pawn, but you can't, and therefore it just seems that it's a one-move pony, right? Queen to c7.
Yeah, yeah, maybe, but still, at the same time, you're stopping this knight coming to d2.
True,
but c4 is a problem, because suddenly the knight might be an octo knight in the center, but all the squares have been taken away. And okay, we haven't seen queen c7, but instead we've seen queen to d7.
All right, queen to d7 played. Huh. So what's the idea of that move? What do you think the idea of that move is? So we had our queen on that d6 square. Is it just anticipating that you might be trying to play knight d2 to c4? So we're just getting our queen out of capture in advance?
Yeah, that could be the idea. What else is there? I was thinking as well, just because I'm a brute at times, and I was thinking put the knight on f4, get some checks in.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and also the queen could be looking at coming into h3. Again, I had a very unfortunate experience at the hands of Fabiano Caruana, where he went and put his queen, well, he had a queen, I was playing black, so he put his queen on h6, and I could have chased it away, and I didn't. And afterwards, everyone was like, you had a great position, but you should have chased away his queen. And I was like, okay, well, I know now. But that's like something that's burnt me a little bit. And queen h3, because it's scary. Yeah, queen h3 looks scary to me, for the queen to be sniffing around this king. She doesn't have any backup.
That's a problem, yeah.
That is a problem.
Yeah, it's just all by herself. Oh, another rule thing. I'm obsessed with chess rules, but you know that when they were playing around with the rules of the queen, you mentioned it could only move one square at a time.
That the queen also could move like a knight in some versions. Hang on, why was this not adopted by the mainstream? I mean, just imagine that. Instead of having a queen. But then again, would she only have the queen? But then she would have the power of everything, right? She would be the queen, bishop, queen,
exactly,
bishop, and a rook, and a knight.
Yeah, it would be a very powerful piece. It would probably just put such a premium on king safety. I mean, similarly, a queen on h6 would be checkmate, right? So these moves g6 and g3 would probably be off balance. So, okay, guys, don't worry. Queen h3 is not a mate threat. But it is fun to just think about these different ways of chess being played and how we've kind of managed to find the one that seems to have tantalized generations, and honestly tantalized even more people ever right now. As you know, we used to speak a few years ago about a chess boom, but now we just see it as chess. It's not even exactly a boom. It's just chess is really popular, and it's kind of staying that way, Jovi. It's so cool to see.
It is definitely cool to see. You know, whenever I tell people that I'm a chess player, well, they all kind of all say to me, oh, they've seen Hikaru on stream, or they followed something. Sometimes I get spotted on the street and they're like, oh, chess. And they don't often know my name, but sometimes they're like, oh, chess player, chess grandmaster. I'm like, not quite grandmaster, but... And we see knight d2 from Lei Tingjie.
Knight d2
and I was
has
wondering,
been played, okay.
I was wondering what would happen if she did